If you were a teenager in the 90s, it's hard to believe that they started over 30 years ago. It was a simpler time when people still used filthy payphones, the internet was in its infancy, and you could actually get away from the reporting of bad news just by turning off your television or radio. Times have certainly changed, but developer and publisher Mighty Yell have taken it upon themselves to create a game that allows players to go back in time and experience those halcyon days for themselves. It is time to get our grift on in the XboxEra review of The Big Con. You play as Ali, or Alison Barlow, as her mum calls her when she's in trouble, a smart-talking slacker teen who lives with her mother above their small independent video rental shop in Lisbon County, a sweet-corn-obsessed small town somewhere in the US. After overhearing loan sharks threaten to take the shop away from her mother unless she repays a $97,000 loan, Ali decides to put her trombone-playing aspirations on hold, skip band camp, and try to pay off her mother's debt. Hanging out by the suddenly rat-infested Two Scoops ice cream parlour, she soon meets a grifter called Ted who takes her under his wing and not only teaches her how to pickpocket people for easy cash, but also sets out to educate her in the finer arts of the con. Together they then set out to make lots of money by dubious means on a trip across country which reaches in its climax to a casino situated in a thinly disguised Las Vegas clone called Las Veganza. To say anything else about the story would spoil it, so I'll leave it there for players to discover for themselves. Looking like a bright, visually arresting 2D cartoon, the game certainly stands out from other titles and has a style all of its own. The way Ali runs and walks is totally angular and made me chuckle whenever I moved her around. Although you could describe the animation as having a slacker aesthetic, it's obvious that considerable thought has gone into the designs incorporated within it. The corporate logo of the in-game coffee shop, Bean Spirit for example, is really eye-catching and would look seriously great on a t-shirt. Having a script made up of only 13 words and several non-verbal grunts, it is quite amusing that a big-name vocal talent such as Erika Ishii signed on to play Ali. Most of the in-game interaction takes the form of talking to people, so I ended up reading a lot of text in speech bubbles while this economic script was used to add nuance and emotion to what was being discussed. Once on the road trip, gameplay revolves around the grifter rules. After identifying a mark, you first need to build a foundation on them by learning about their needs and desires. This can often be done by listening to their conversations from a distance, and specific eavesdropping spots are signposted by a giant yellow ear. Next, you need to physically find what the mark requires in your local surroundings. This may entail searching rubbish bins, stealing from shops, or pickpocketing other hapless victims. Being a petulant teenager, you are able to kick most solid objects, and this can sometimes have some surprisingly beneficial results. After collecting your required items, you then need to approach the victim in a way that attains their trust. One example of this is by using knowledge that you've learned from listening to or conversing with others. If you seem to be an expert on something the mark is interested in, they are far more likely to trust you, and this will convince them to exchange an item with you or pay big money for what you're offering them. While searching surroundings ranging from a train, a desert and a mall, you can also come across various other items that can either be sold to a very strange character known as the Collector, or used to disguise yourself. These disguises can be used to intimidate people or sneak your way into prestigious areas, but they do have another primary purpose. The pickpocketing mechanic is a fairly simple system of holding down a button for a certain amount of time until a gauge is filled. As you move through the game's locations, the NPCs carry larger amounts of money as standard, but among these certain individuals have even larger amounts or required items that have to be attained to progress. In these cases, the gauge is more difficult to fill, and being caught red-handed ends with Ali being busted. She's then unable to even attempt to pickpocket that person again unless she's wearing one of the disguises that she has previously discovered and stored in her very 90s fanny pack, or bum bag as we call them in the UK. These are a welcome and amusing touch, ranging from a monocle to a bearded wizard outfit, a cat mask and a paper bag with holes cut in it. It is a surprisingly fun part of the gameplay, wearing each of these different items to avoid suspicious eyes. Being busted 3 times results in Ali being removed from her surroundings and punished. This punishment takes the form of a period at the local chain video rental shop, rewinding tapes that customers have returned without rewinding. This was considered to be bad form back in the day, to the extent that the phrase "be kind, rewind" was often seen on posters in video stores. Ali hates doing this chore for her own mum, so there really is no finer punishment for her. She does, however, get her confiscated ill-gotten gains returned to her after carrying out her sentence. Ali has a notebook which is used to note down useful information or details that need to be remembered for later on, and is often visited by her imaginary friend Rad Ghost. Made up of a bedsheet and sunglasses, a backwards cap and sometimes a skateboard, this character is pretty much the embodiment of a 90s slacker culture. He was obviously real at some point and became her personal hero, as he sometimes shows up in the videos that Ali is being forced to rewind, and appears to offer advice on how to complete a level if you are struggling with it. Lots of 90s tropes have actually been placed within the game in the form of subtly changed movie posters for films like Dazed and Confused, shops full of plaid clothing, a random foodstuff called Horm, which is made up of some truly disgusting ingredients, and the chance to pickpocket Wayne and Garth from Wayne's World, which I found to be an incredibly satisfying experience. Some required items, such as the gold fanny pack, can also be created from scavenged materials if you're unable to steal them from the more difficult pickpocketing targets. There are extra puzzles to solve in order for Ali to move between the stages in a level. For example, on a train, she's required to move between carriages, with the rewards growing larger as she heads towards the first class section at the front. These puzzles consist of finding ways to bribe or con individuals blocking your way, or working out security pin codes. They're not particularly difficult, but they are fun to solve, particularly the first class pin code. In some places, luggage can be discovered with 3-digit security locks. In my playthrough, I found no evidence that there was any other way to open these apart from using a process of elimination and trying all of the possible number combinations. This was slightly time consuming, but the rewards gained when you succeed, as well as a great sense of accomplishment, made bothering to do this worthwhile. The only puzzle I found personally annoying involved navigating your way through the desert without passing out at a feverishly imagined chain store called Video Hell. In the end, I chose to make a note of the direction choices that were successful, and it didn't take too long to escape my surroundings. There is also a secondary story built into the narrative about a teenager growing up and learning life lessons, such as whether you should keep in contact with the people you love, should you lie or tell the truth, who should you trust, and how important is it to do what you want to do rather than what others expect of you. This is subtly and nicely handled by the developers, as is another thread about Ali being in love with her best friend and the confusion that this has caused within their relationship. This is another example of the mature handling of LGBTQ relationships that is becoming more and more commonplace and welcome in gaming. In terms of accessibility, the game doesn't offer much apart from the option to turn off the pickpocketing minigame to make things a bit easier. The game credits have some very interesting thanks at the end, which are worth hanging around to check out, as is the official The Big Con website, which exactly duplicates how the internet looked back in 1994. In conclusion, this is an unusual game with a unique visual appearance and gameplay that revolves around interacting with everyone and everything you come across. There are tons of 90s references, some great comedy moments, and a serious story at the heart of it all. Criminality has never been so much fun, and thankfully in the Big Con no one really gets hurt. Available on day one via Xbox Game Pass, and with roughly a 6 to 8 hour completion time, this is a title well worth checking out. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this review, be sure to hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so that we can let you know when we've got some fresh content. And we'll see you next time.